Number 9, Allan Campbell. James, let's start with you. I mean, I was going to start with you, Stefan, because I know 2 years ago when the site was up and running, you wrote something about Allan Campbell when he was only 19, and at that point he was already kind of running the show for Motherwell, and he's just kind of gone from strength to strength in that time. James, what is it that makes him so integral to Motherwell, and also just such a great prospect at 21 that he's number 9 in this list?
I think a lot of it's just down to he's remarkably consistent. Like, you know exactly what you're getting from him in every game, and he rarely puts in a poor performance. I mean, he's 21 years old, and he's already got 120 games for Motherwell under his belt, and then he's got about, I think it's like 20 or so under 21 caps as well for the national team. So I mean, he's played a extraordinary amount of games for someone of that age, and when you consider as well that he spent his entire career in the top flight. He's not one of these guys that's been away on loan and racked up appearances elsewhere. He's broken into the first team at Motherwell and made that starting position his own. Now, I think when football does resume and you get Turnbull back in that midfield, I think that maybe frees up Campbell to, sort of get to his best, because I think that we did see his best football when teams were, having to focus on Turnbull for obvious reasons, and obviously Turnbull plays a wee bit further up the park, and then that really freed up space for Campbell to sort of drive, because I think he is at heart like a box-to-box midfielder, and we were saying before we recorded that statistically he's not got any stats where he really jumps out and you're like, oh wow, like that's amazing, he's the best in the league at X, Y or Z. But he's one of these guys that can just sort of do it all, and do it all either competently or well, and having someone like that is, like that's a really strong asset to any team, just to have someone who you can put him in, he's dependable, and he just does everything good. He doesn't make mistakes. He contributes in attacking phases of play. He's good in defence. He's good at recycling possession. He's one of those players I think he could definitely be playing at a higher level. But I mean, I'm very happy to see him at Motherwell still getting games, and I think that when you look at Motherwell's success over the last 18 months or so, he's one of a few players who's been constant during that, and Robinson has rightly sort of built his midfield around him to an extent, and I mean when you watch him you can see why. He's just he's one of these guys who really does have it all, and if it wasn't for the fact that the national team, we've got like about 1 million centre mids who are all playing very, very well and at high levels, if it wasn't for that, I think Campbell would have been called up by now, maybe even capped, because I think he's a tremendous prospect, and I think that he is definitely a future Scotland international in the making.
I mean, I actually can't believe he's only 21 still. I just feel like, particularly on the site, we spoke about him a lot, and we've spoken about him on the podcast in the past as well. I just can't believe, as you say, James, the fact he's got that many appearances for Motherwell at 21's pretty wild, and it's not like you say a team like Livingston where they've been going through the leagues like maybe Craig Halkett has when he's kind of got all these appearances, but Stefan, is it purely down to him just being consistent and also the versatility that James mentions, or is there anything else in particular you'd like to point out?
No, I mean, I think that's spot on. I found myself kind of nodding along as usual when James was kind of talking there, and I think one of the interesting things about him is that he's obviously kind of flew under the radar to an extent with kind of rival or fans outside of Motherwell, because they do tend to kind of produce these very sparkly, exciting attacking players and defensive players to an extent, and Campbell to an extent isn't really either. He's clearly last season was in the shadow of Turnbull, and there's maybe players before that as well, but he's been so consistent and so clever and so impressive, I think, for Motherwell for so long now that it's almost like we've just kind of gotten used to him, and he's only just kind of 21. I agree that he is definitely a box-to-box midfielder rather than a defensive midfielder. I think some people still kind of classify him as that, but talking about a midfielder who's picked up 5 goals in the league this season, which is certainly nothing to smirk at, and I think probably one of the most impressive things about him as well is that Stephen Robinson's Motherwell have completely changed their team and tactics maybe 2 or 3 times since he arrived at the club, and quite drastically so. They've gone from a very kind of physical defensive side into this kind of freewheeling attacking, counter-attacking team, and I think it's really impressive and quite telling that Campbell has still remained at the heart of both of those sides. I think tactically he's superb. He seems to be very good at just kind of doing a bit of everything. He's great at interceptions, he's great at getting in the box and scoring goals. He might not be the best defensive midfielder in the league, he might not be the best attacking one, but he's certainly in the top 10 for both. And I think just there. I was wondering, who could you maybe compare him to in terms of like where his career could take him. And as maybe outlandish as it sounds, is I think he's actually quite similar to maybe a John McGinn, in the sense that we weren't really entirely sure what McGinn was after he left Hibs. He kind of did a bit of everything, and there was kind of question marks over whether he'd be able to rely on any particular skill set when he moved down to England. But he just got on with it, and he proved to be a remarkable all-round midfielder, which just allowed him to thrive in, the most expensive league in the world. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if Allan Campbell was able to do something similar. I think he's just as impressive, McGinn, to an extent. Still very young, and he's already proved himself undoubtedly at a Premiership level. And I'm not by any means suggesting that he has to get up and leave Motherwell anytime soon. I think Steve Clarke's well aware of him, as obviously are the coaches for under-21s, under-19s. But I think he could honestly go on and play at a really high level, as McGinn did. And I think he actually kind of reminds me quite a lot of McGinn in terms of skill set and ability.
Do you have anything you'd like to add to that, James, at all? I mean, I feel like it's difficult because I think that is the main point, that he is just ever present in that team, and he's just got that kind of skill set where even looking through what he's played this season in the different formations, whatever's asked of him, he seems to perform, whether that is playing as a defensive midfielder, and it's maybe easy to pigeonhole him as that because that's where he plays the majority of the time, but when he's asked to play just behind the strikers, he seems to do a good job there. He chips in with the odd goal and assist. Is there anything else we're kind of missing out here, or do you think that is what kind of his main strengths are?
No, yeah, I think we've covered him pretty well, to be honest. Yeah, I think as we say, yeah, he's better as a sort of like a sort of number 8 almost. I think he benefits when he's got another midfielder playing slightly further forward, and another one maybe holding like the likes of Donnelly or Polworth or whatever. So no, I think he's, as we keep saying, he's an all-rounder. He does everything very well. There's a reason why he's been starting week in, week out for Motherwell since he was 18. He's a very, very good player, and as we've said a few times throughout this series, the most important thing that for players of that age is to get minutes, and he's getting minutes and has done consistently at a high level, and that can only be good for his long-term development.